Gee, now that we're going live, I can't finish off my beer.
Nope, you can't. Hi, Andrea.
Hi there. There it is. There we go. Remember to guard your privacy and abide by our community guidelines. Get rid of this.
Hello, everyone.
Put your phone on stun. Sorry. Oh.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Vickie's Country Home. And tonight's live stream, we're going to talk about getting off grid, how to get started in that whole process. And since I'm not the expert, he is. This is my husband, Brian, and a very smart guy. But this subject is huge. So we can't cover everything, but what we're going to do is show you how to get started. And maybe you can say it better.
Okay, so anyway, it is a fairly broad subject. And so what we'd kind of like to do this evening is maybe answer some questions that you might have and we'll just kind of use that as a jumping off point. We do have videos planned for the future that shows our system, and that will go into greater detail about how to have it, how to put together a system, at least based on what we did, because when we started, didn't know anything. Really didn't know anything, and we really relied upon the vendor that provided us our batteries and our inverters and panels, our entire system. And I don't suggest that that can be a way to go. The particular guy that we used, he really didn't turn out to be really thinking in our best interest more than he was in his pocketbook. We hope that we can give you some decent advice here tonight based on questions that you might want us to answer, and if we can answer it, that'll be great. And if not, I've got some websites I'm going to point you to online that can kind of get you going. But in the future, we will have a video that we can take, or videos that we can take longer and drill down more in depth to what we have. Start looking for land in AR. Is that Arkansas? Arizona. Yep, eyes to see. So if you have a question, please go ahead and do it all in caps. You're not going to be shouting at me or anything, so that's okay. It's not a problem. But what it does is it does make it step out a little bit, or stick out a bit, so I can make sure that at least I can go ahead and answer your questions. So
and that is Arkansas.
That is Arkansas.
Yes.
Okay, I just see Arkansas. Okay, cool. We used to live in Texas. We both grew up in Texas. I'm sure that Vickie has told you that before. And I was actually stationed at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, at Fort Walton Beach, Florida, when I was in the Air Force. It's a pretty area there. All around the Gulf Coast is just really nice. And the seafood dinners, man, are just awesome. You can't beat it anywhere. So anyway, just a little just off the top of my head, one of the reasons that we initially decided to go off grid, right, and build our own power system for our home really had a lot to do with financial concerns back when we built our house. We built greenfield, around 40 acres. And to bring power out to our house would have been a little over $60,000 to get the lines out and get the hookup and do all that. I mean, it's just really, really expensive to get a new service out to a home in the country. And this actually made more financial sense to us because there was a minimum monthly that we had to pay whether we used the power or not from the bed. Yeah,
in addition to the 60,000 up front.
Right.
For 5 years.
Yeah, for 5 years it was going to be a minimum payment of $250 a month. Plus on top of that, what it took to bring the infrastructure out. Plus on top of that, it actually, I was thinking it would be great to have power on at the house and everybody else didn't. And that has been the case even as early as 2 days ago. So I mean, we really weren't thinking about what would happen, when excrement hits the rotating device. And it was more of a financial decision, and the fact that, we have our own power plant, and that's what it really gets down to. It's our own power plant. And but there's a lot to it, and there's things that really to take into consideration before you decide that you want to go this way or not. Because there is upkeep, there is maintenance, and you can, mistakes can be made that will cost you a lot of money and make your power system basically unusable. So anyway, are there any questions to start out with? Yes, we were. Yeah.
Be sure and type in all caps, please, so we gets our attention.
Was there a question anywhere?
I haven't yet.
Okay.
Oops, sorry, Kepler. How much energy do you generate a month? With how many solar units? We're in process of designing our house.
Right. And, I could probably pull that up. Let me see here a second.
He has these teeny little apps that he can read on his phone.
Oh, what is that? Oh,
and know how much power we have stored, we're generating.
Yeah. Well, that is the wrong tool. Never use that tool. Okay, so let me see. Looking at the charge controller application, that I have, we can, since I don't reset it. I really don't. That's a hard one for me to answer because I really don't follow how much that we actually use. And that was a very good question, Andrea, that you did. If you're going to go off grid, you need to understand what your energy usage is going to be, prior to doing that. How do you live? All right. And do you want to live off grid exactly the same way that you did on grid? That was kind of our goal. All right. We wanted to make it that just as we lived off grid, just as we lived on grid, that we would live on grid. Now, we did not have our system sized right to begin with. Like I said, most solar companies, when you go to them to, start talking and going through the process of how much batteries did you, I'll tell you, in a minute why we chose Nevada. But they will, eventually it's going to get down to how much money do you have to spend? And what that will do is you say, well, I may only have 20,000 or 30,000 to spend on a solar system, which these days will get you a better system than what we paid 50,000 for, just due to the difference in the cost of solar panels now. But the thing is that if you undersize your system, you're going to find that you're going to be running your generator a lot. Okay, even in the summer, when we have the maximum amount of what's called insolation. It's the amount of time the sun is on the panels, and they are providing, able to provide power to recharge your battery banks or your battery bank all right, from the amount of power that you pulled out of them during the night when the sun wasn't there. And also run your house during the day. Now, the thing is that to properly size your house, and this is a tough one, you need to decide, I believe at this time, what is the minimum lifestyle that you want to live off the grid. In other words, if you have 3 refrigerators and 2 free freezers at your house when you're on grid, well, you know what? You may not be able to do that. You could, but you're going to have a lot more. You're going to have a larger battery bank to ensure that you're going to make it through the night until the sun comes up the next day. Or, you need to decide that, how many days of low sunlight can I take, right, before I want to run my generator. All right, so it gets down to how much time you want to run your generator, all right, in order to keep your house up, and also understanding that depending on the battery type that you get, the more times you drain them down to, if it's lead acid, it's going to be 30% max, and how many full charge cycles you can do on that battery bank before your batteries become useless, all right, before you suck all the life out of them. So, and I realize this is kind of a lengthy answer here, but it really is an important question. When you're looking at sizing for a home, square footage does not matter. What matters is, what are your energy users? And some of the biggest ones are going to be your refrigerator, your freezer. Yeah, and absolutely never, ever have anything that produces heat through electrical resistance. So no electric stoves, no electric heat of any type, no electric dryer. All those need to be natural gas. And if I could figure out a way to make a natural gas powered blow dryer without catching Vickie's hair on fire, believe you me, I would do that. Right. So all of this goes together to determine, the size of system that you need. And I haven't even talked about the panels yet. I'm just talking about how big of a battery bank are you going to need to be able to power your house for however many days of low sunlight, which you're going to have during the winter, right, when you have the least amount of insulation, and especially as you're diving into what I call the hole, which is going to be December 21st or 20th or the 19th or the 22nd, whenever the winter solstice hits. That's when you have the least amount of insulation, and that's insolation, on your panels to be able to charge your battery bank. And then, how often you want to run your generator. All right, and that's the long answer. All right, you size your battery bank and your inverters first for the amount of power that your home is going to use based on the amount of electrical consumers in their house you have. That's, your refrigerator, your freezer, washing machine, TVs. Gosh, get the LED TVs, no plasma. We had a plasma to begin with. That thing pulled like 400 watts when it was blowing and going. And your well pump, all right? You get a solar well pump, something that only maybe pulls 3 to 5 gallons a minute, and you pump low and slow into a tank. And if that tank isn't 30 feet above your house, to give you enough pressure, then you got to have a pressure pump. Ours pulls, gosh, when our pressure pump is running, my gosh, that thing is, out of 24 volts at 50 amps. So it's running. So that thing is pulling about 1,800 watts when that thing is running. So, all these things come together to determine the size of system you need. And then you look at how many panels you're going to need to have to be able to charge that up, when your batteries go down to 30%, if you're doing lead acid. And then that's how you can probably most effectively, size your system. There is a company that I deal with out of Shasta, California, and it is Wholesale Solar, and they actually do a pretty good job. They're not like, let's see, I'm going to pop their URL here in the chat. They have some pretty good online, going off grid advice. I would absolutely, recommend that if you're going to go off grid, that what you do is, you get some books on it and read up on it. And actually, these guys here, this is the forum at Northern Arizona Wind and Sun. And these guys, you get a lot of really, really good advice from this forum. So get on a forum, talk to people, pick their brains. This guy, this site right here that I'm going to give you, please copy this down, bookmark this. This site right here is, the best site on determining, how you aim your panels and at what angle, all right, that you have them at. Ours are fixed at 37 degrees because for the latitude that we are at, that actually is the most efficient for both summer, spring, summer, summer, fall, winter, and spring. Right? We don't adjust our panels. Okay, we don't have trackers. We used to do that on our pole mounts, but it really didn't do much. And you'll see that when you go to this site. That one will tell you, it'll ask you based on latitude and the latitude that you're at. It'll tell you exactly how to aim them, if you're going to move them, how to do it 4 times a year. And it's actually really, really good. Yeah. Oh, why did we move to Nevada? Because California has become an absolute freak show.
And we wanted space around us.
Yeah.
We want people looking in our windows from their windows because we wanted some.
Yeah. Plus, on top of that, at the time,
taxes.
Nevada, we still don't have a state income tax. Also, on top of that, it is still sort of mostly Second Amendment friendly, although, we have an influx of wackadoos from California that are trying to Californicate Nevada right now. Sorry if I'm insulting anybody. I hope I'm not. It's just the way California is. One of the most beautiful states, absolutely beautiful places on God's green earth is California. And unfortunately, it's run by a bunch of wackadoos. So
we had another question.
Yeah.
Ice2C asked, I keep seeing pump heat in
Heat pumps.
Heat pumps, yes.
No.
Housing listings.
No. If you are going to go off grid in the country, all right, if you're going to go grid tie in the city, then you can have, that's a totally different conversation, because a lot of the grid tie in the cities now is handled by companies that actually want to become your power company. They'll put a bunch of panels, grid tie panels on your roof without any batteries, and you actually pay them for your power. And if you exceed it, the penalties that you figure on for a year, the penalties are just horrific. Again, if you're going to be out of the country or you want to have an off-grid type of system, no electrical, no air conditioning, no AC, no heat pump. You're either going to do hydronic heat which is cool. Ours is sort of in, but it's not all the way in. So that's a project. Or you're going to do wood. If you got a good source of wood around, we really don't, but we do heat our house with wood. Or you can use natural gas, propane. All right, to heat your house, but understand that when you have a forced air heating system, that motor is going to be pulling, watts out of your battery bank at night, and so you may heat your house up during the day and just not heat it at night. Something like that, depending upon the size of the battery bank you got. So no resistant, no big, wattage, energy consumers, because the ones that are going to hit you the most, could be your well pump, could be your pressure pump, depending on how you get your house set up. And for sure, it's going to be your refrigerator and a freezer.
We get around
the pressure pump. Yeah.
We have a workaround.
Yeah. What I did on that is that, like I said, our pressure pump, it pulls, golly, when I see that thing kick on, it's a good 40 or 50 amps out of our battery bank. And we have a 24-volt system. That's another thing. When you get a system, you probably want to do 48 volts. And sorry about this. I realize this is a brain dump. The thing is that, if it was a 48-volt system, the amount of amps is going to be half that. But if that gets into Ohm's law, by the way, if you're kind of wondering about some of the stuff I'm talking about, we talk about watts and amperage and stuff here, read up on Ohm's law. I learned that in electronics school when I was in the Air Force. I shouldn't have done that. Why did I do that? Oh, okay.
And he's an IT techie geek kind of guy too. So
let me see. I've been wanting to, but my state says no. For what?
To go off grid.
Your state says no. Your state can't do that.
Yes, some states do.
Time to leave that state.
Yeah.
Who says you can't go off grid?
There's a number of states that make it really, really hard.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. What I do it again? Yeah.
You're in Michigan? I don't remember for sure. That's what I'm thinking.
So you have to be tied to the grid and use. So what that probably is there's a lot of people there whose power bills are subsidized, and you need to be hooked up to the grid and use their power so you can help with the subsidizing. Probably what it is.
Florida's another one that makes it really hard.
Yeah, boy,
there's several.
Yeah, I'd move if you could. Which I realize sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's not possible. But it is, having your own power system. Your power system can be very rewarding. Understand you're paying for it all pretty much up front. The most cost-effective source of power is the grid. I'm going to tell you that. It is also one of the most vulnerable parts of your house because the grid can go down at any time, not based on anything you've done. And you have a power outage we had a power outage in California one time. We were in the South Bay that lasted like a day and a half. Yeah. So that now I'm going to talk to you about the real serious part of this right now. And that has to do with your battery bank. Now, I'm putting a link in here to Iron Edison, which are nickel iron batteries. If you're going to go off late, these are expensive. They're expensive because they'll last 40, 50, 60 years. They're old technology. Right now, the majority of them are made in China because a company called Exide bought the Edison, the patents to these, and they buried them. All right, basically, you couldn't make them anymore in the U.S. So China built them, and China's importing them in. I believe there's a company now that has the right to build them here in the U.S. But Your battery bank is the heart of your system, believe it or not. I mean, the inverters, yeah, they take DC, make it AC. That's what you power your. That's where the, that's what provides the alternating current power to run your house on. But it's the battery bank that stores the power that is going to feed the inverters to power your house when there is no sun. All right. Or when there's not very much sun, a lot of, stormy in the winter, we've had it here where we haven't had much sun at all for a couple of weeks at times. Should the house be semi-underground? Yeah, if you want to do that, that's pretty cool. But let me get back to the battery bank, and I'll actually address that in a moment. That is the core of your system, and it is probably the most expensive part of your system. Our batteries, we probably got 20 grand in our batteries right now. And they are what's called valve regulated lead acid. Some people call them AGMs, but these are different than AGMs. These were in data centers. Both of the ones that we have, I think one was in a telco, and one of the other bank was in a data center. They only use them for a couple of years. They're the Absolute 2P. AGMs, I hate to use the word AGM, it's really valve regulated lead acid. These are sealed, don't really have to mess with water maintenance or anything like that. Very easy to deal with as long as you don't overcharge them, you don't overdraw them, and you don't overheat them. One mistake most you're ever going to get away with is two. And then the battery bank becomes useless. Flooded batteries don't have quite that issue, except you run them out of water, you're done. These batteries have a supposed lifespan of 25 years. We've had them up and running for 12 now, 13. They're starting to age, and I can tell that because capacity is down. With nickel iron, these things last 40, 50, 60 years, and all you have to do is change out the electrolyte, which is potassium, every 12 to 15 years. But they're very expensive. For us to replace the battery bank to a level that I think is appropriate for us is going to be around $22,000. Which is a chunk of money. You can suck a lot of power out of the grid over 10, 15 years and not hit $22,000.
And it's not green as everyone thinks.
No.
Being off grid and solar and everything, you're not green.
No. I mean,
a lot of resources go into building and transporting that stuff.
Yeah. The chemicals and the process that we use to make the batteries and the panels, especially because the panels are a solid state device, and the chemicals that are used in producing that and washing them and building the crystals and everything. I tell you what, we have a bigger pollution, quote unquote, footprint, than any of you do, as far as I can tell.
Valley S wants to know, can an older woman handle this alone? And I'm going to say, I think it depends on how it's set up.
Yeah, it depends. You have friends, family. I don't like to comment on the capabilities of people that I don't know, because I tell you what, I know some people that are a lot older, that are older than I am, that can whip my butt. Yeah. All right, I know the pastor of our church, he's over 80 years old, and he is sharp as a tack. He goes out and maintains his 40 acres and runs his tractor and does all of that. And I tell you what, I'm not sure that age I don't think I'm going to answer that, because I just don't know you. And I know that our pastor and his wife could handle this no problem. Yet we had other neighbors that were in the 60s like us that, there were a number of us that told him, no, don't do that, because we knew, he was not going to be able to handle it. So it really depends on the person. And Vale, I tell you what, that's a decision you got to make. And the fact that you asked the question leads me to believe you probably could. So where was I? Oh, on the battery bank. So you size the battery bank. That's where all of this starts, the sizing goes. As far as, again, the electrical consumers in your house, in your home, and how long do you want to be able to run those, based on no sun. If you have any type of lead acid bad battery, whether it's flooded or whether it's VRLA, AGM, you can only draw those down safely about 30%, or you're going to wipe your battery bank out in about 5 to 6 years. Okay, if you overdraw them. Lithium ion, I would not have those in my house anywhere, just due to the fact that there's a membrane between the positive and negative parts of that battery. If that membrane gets breached, they superheat and catch on fire. I will not use the Tesla Powerwall at all, and I don't recommend that anybody buy those. Lithium ion battery banks last about 10 years before they're completely depleted.
Okay, there's a question.
Oh yeah, what's that? I'm sorry.
Can you protect your electrical stuff, putting them in a chest freezer, not plugged in, of course? That would.
For what?
I guess for.
Are you talking
EMP?
for an EMP? You really need a Faraday shield.
Yeah.
Which would be a copper mesh. Now, putting them in a freezer, that would be what? That would be your inverters, but you got to figure cooling. You got to figure, not plugged in.
I mean, storage.
For storage, maybe you could.
It would protect them.
Yeah, but you need to have a good ground for that metal on the outside. It needs to be grounded. Because, if you have some type of pulse, we studied this. I worked in shielded data centers out at the Johnson Space Center. And, because the whole room was wrapped in a Faraday shield. The mainframes I worked on back in the 80s, all the covers made a Faraday shield, to keep electrical interference from messing with the electronics. But I don't know if it's practical, to do that, but you could try it. If you got a spare freezer, you got extra parts, extra inverters and stuff like that, concerned about an EMP, that could possibly help. Yeah. But on the nickel iron, this is something that when you're sizing those, you can draw those down 80, 90%, not hurt them. I'm serious. You can draw them down 80 to 90% and not hurt them. You can overcharge them and not hurt them. You can undercharge them and not hurt them. They don't suffer from sulfation. They can suffer from what's called carbonation, which is the release of CO2 or release of CO2 that's one of the things that reduces when the batteries are being drawn down. So when you go to size that, if I had, let's say, a 1,000 amp hour battery bank at 48 volts with lead acid, well, I could get a 300 amp hour nickel iron battery bank that would do pretty much the same thing, knowing that I'm going to charge them down, draw them down 80% or 90% or whatever. The one thing about nickel irons is you have to make sure that you don't run them out of water. And when they're being used and they're being charged, they do use a bit of water. So you really need to keep on top of that. Flooded lead acid, the same way. They'll actually boil, when they're being charged, So battery banks are really, really important. And that's what you size first, along with your inverters, how many watts your house is going to pull. And then you go to your panels, your charging devices, which are going to be your photovoltaics. So if you draw down your batteries, let's say you pull 1,000 watt hours, which is a lot. Let's say you pull out 800 watt hours out of your battery bank during the night, or let's say over 2 days or 3 days, if you're going to, want to not have to charge them, if the sun's not really, if we got a lot of, shade, the panels being shaded from clouds and stuff like that, then you need to figure out how much power you can pull out of those panels to be able to charge your battery bank up to full charge plus an extra 10 or 15% during the absorbed phase of charging. Not going to get into that tonight. But the thing is that will tell you how big of a photovoltaic array you're going to need. And then you need to decide, gee, am I going to do that based on the amount of insolation, insolation, during the summer? Or is it going to be when you're in the hole pretty deep, starting in November and not really climbing out of until March? All right, as far as the fact that the days get a lot shorter, the nights get a lot longer, using a lot more power out of the battery bank, and then, not as much to be able to put the watts back in. We have 5,600 watts of solar, and truthfully, for the winter months, I wish we had about another 30 to 40, maybe 50% more, to help for those, when the days get shorter coming up to the winter solstice. And then there's wind, which we have a wind generator. The tower failed on us. It was a horrible design given to us by the guy who sold us our system. That can help a little bit, might carry you through the night if depending on if you got a storm going on, the wind's blowing. Wind generators are very expensive. The towers are very expensive. And then, you have a generator. Does it fold? Yes, it does. The charge, yep. The colder your batteries get, the less efficient they are, the less actual capacity that they have. And yes, that does affect it. Same way if they get real hot, same thing. Sure. But on the generator, you get a generator that can charge your battery bank up based on the charging profiles of the batteries you have. Ours we're very careful with on valve regulated lead acid or AGMs. You have an absolute maximum voltage that you can charge those guys at. If you go above it, you're going to ruin them within a charge or two. And and you size that generator to where, based on the charging profile of the battery bank you have, how ours takes about 7 hours to charge our bank. And I highly recommend you get a diesel. Don't get gas. We have a gas as a backup. Propane. We had a propane.
That was expensive.
Yeah. And with a diesel, you can always run that on veg. All right, on the vegetable oil, or like in the case that excrement hits the rotating device, you can go around pulling motor oil out of cars that are abandoned because there's no gas, and you can filter that and use that to run a diesel on. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so
sorry about that. I'm bloviating
quite a ways. So what backup systems might be needed?
Backup for power? Generator.
Yeah. Do you know anything about the Generac system whole house generator?
Okay, now those are either going to be natural gas, propane. I recommend a diesel.
Go diesel.
Yeah.
We've got another one. Do you use supplemental heating sources?
Yes, we do. We have a fireplace that does a pretty good job of heating the house. Wood for us is pretty expensive, but we do have kerosene. And when it gets really, really cold, when it gets down below zero, we'll crank those up to make sure the house stays warm.
Does placing batteries in a plastic box and surrounding but not covering with dirt, sand help to keep the temperature variation in check?
That would make them awfully hard to maintain if you're going to bury them in a hole outside. What you will do if you have, unless your batteries are sealed, ours are sealed so there's no off-gassing. When I talk about off-gassing, especially in lead acid, as they are being used and as they are being charged, they give off hydrogen and oxygen, which is pretty explosive. So if you have, flooded lead acid, which is with the caps, nickel iron, any of those must be in a battery box that is vented to the outside. So in other words, all that hydrogen gets vented outside so your house doesn't go kaboom. And when you build that battery box, what our friends have done out here is they insulate them.
So what square footage house is most efficient, in your opinion? Not like ours.
You know what? It doesn't, like I said.
I think it depends on what you use.
Yeah, square footage to me doesn't matter, except in the area of if you're going to heat the whole house, that's your heating source in the winter. The other thing is that really it has to do with your consumers, your electrical consumers. I could have 1,000 square foot home that I had 3 refrigerators and 2 freezers and, 4 women living in the house, each with their own blow dryer. And compare that to a house that's 5,000 square feet that has 1 refrigerator, 1 freezer, and only guys live there.
Yeah, but then you got all the electronics,
Well, yeah, but But I, the 5,000 square foot home is going to use less electricity. So it really depends on the electrical consumers that you have in the house. And I'm talking about refrigerators, freezers, don't do air conditioning, don't do electric stove, don't do electric, oven, don't do any of that stuff. And it's more about how many devices you have in your home that are going to be using the electrical. Best as smaller rooms or common ones. That, pretty much is up to you.
Purposes.
Yeah, for heating.
It might be better to have
have like common rooms, Another thing is have ceiling fans in, which we have.
Absolutely.
In our home.
And high ceilings.
Yeah, high ceilings for heat. If you got ceiling fans, it'll all collect up there and use ceiling fans to recirculate it back down into the home. But on our home, we have 0 air conditioning. Now we can get away with that here in the high desert because it might be 105, 110 degrees during the day. It cools down, not often, but it cools down to, 60 or 70 degrees at night. You open the windows. If you have a whole house fan, a very electrically efficient one, that's variable speed, you can use that to suck cold air into the house. Plus, on top of that, we have 6-inch walls with Optima insulation in it. The house is wrapped in 1 inch of foam, and then we have R48 insulation in the attic, along with a radiant barrier. If you're going to build new, or even if you're retrofitting a house, radiant barrier just, 90% of all heat loss and gain is through the roof. And radiant barriers really, 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 really help. Hot days, our house might get up to 80. At the hottest time we've ever seen it has been 80 degrees. Low humidity, ceiling fans, you don't feel it. Our friends that have normal houses that don't have the radiant barrier, the insulation we have on the roof, their houses might be sitting in the 90s. So.
Valley S said, what's your 3 choice for states for this? And there's so many parts to it, but it works here in Northern Nevada. Arizona, you're going to have excessive heat.
Yeah, Arizona gets extraordinarily hot. Yeah. I would not live in Phoenix at all. Great people down there. I've done work down there for Sun and for Oracle and taught a bunch of classes out there. But, it's midnight and it's 98 degrees there. Las Vegas is the same way.
I'm thinking maybe Idaho, Eastern
Idaho,
Oregon.
Eastern Oregon, Eastern Washington State.
Yeah.
But then Eastern Washington State, that's like the Bay Area North.
So you have to factor in growing conditions, the laws, there's a lot of parts to that, but
Utah might be good as well.
Utah would probably do well too.
Yeah, because what you want, especially in staying cool, well, it also depends where your work is.
The number of days of sunshine in a year.
Yep, Nevada's pretty good for this, especially if you're in Western Nevada, which is where we're at, because it's close enough to the places that I work and the type of work I do that I can work out of our home pretty much independently. And if I need an airport, I've got a good airport here. So
Christy Betts asked, would it be hard to run just one small window air conditioner on solar?
Yes.
It'll eat a lot of power.
Yes, the compressors.
It'll eat a lot of power.
Think that you're adding another refrigerator, or actually something with more refrigerator. If you're in a dry climate. Now, I understand where you're coming from. If you're down around the Gulf Coast, if you're in Texas, not having air conditioning is not going to work well in the summer. I totally get that. So what you would have is, possibly, you could cool one room with a small air conditioner, understanding you need to figure out the amount of power that's going to use. See if it fits in your battery bank, expand your battery bank, or just understand you're going to run your generator, more than you probably want to. Having lived on the Texas Gulf Coast and the Florida Gulf Coast, I'm telling you, the humidity there, you can't use a swamp cooler. See, we could use a swamp cooler out here if we wanted to.
Because it's dry.
Yeah, because it's dry. In San Antonio or in Houston or in Fort Walton Beach, you'd have your house would be covered in mold. So let's see, let's see, do you consider growing food alternative fuel sources, snow amounts? Snow doesn't bother us that much.
And we are kind of protected from the snow. I just answered that. But when we were looking for the land, we weren't
gonna have to cut
really looking at that. Yeah, we're about to a point where Brian's going to have to leave. So if you have a question that we're not answering, email me or put it here, and we'll see if we can get that answered for you.
Yeah. Now on on growing food, here where we are, it's difficult. It can be. It's not like when we lived in California where everything grows. And especially out here, the battle of the grasshoppers the past 2 years has been interesting. And we have a shorter growing season here. And there's some things that just aren't going to grow well. So you just need to figure out what grows well and do that. Alternative fuel sources, I have a diesel truck. And like I said, if things were to get really bad, let's say, what I'd like to say, excrement hitting the rotating device, diesel's the way to go for a vehicle, and it's also the way to go for a generator, because you can run that on the vegetable oil, and also you can run it on filtered, cleaned crankcase oil.
So I think we're going to have to wrap up now. But again, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you for really good discussions.
And you're welcome.
Questions.
Yeah.
And again, if you have questions, contact me. Let me know. We'll try and get the information for you.
And go ahead and email Vickie, and we'll go ahead and answer some questions as we can, point you in the right directions. Here, just real quick. Now, I'm not saying use these guys absolutely. This is for diesel generators. My brother-in-law is actually powering his house from these guys. These are who we bought our generator from, and they have these nice little 3 and 4 cylinder Perkins diesels with the Pancake McAulty alternators on them, and But this can just give you an idea of what is available out there, and then you can find another source for them if you want to. And if you're looking, for a wind generator, the company that we bought from went out of business. It's still good. I just got to fix the tower, but on the evil Amazon site, here's like a 2,000 watt
I could
one.
get an affiliate link.
It's like $2,000 for. It's like under 1,000 for a 2,000 watt wind generator. But the thing is, the tower is probably going to cost you again twice as much as that, depending on the type of tower you do. And oh, by the way, when you're figuring out, one last thing, when you're figuring out your cost, of your panels, you need to figure maybe 50% more for your mounting.
And the cost of shipping usually.
Yeah. But the mounting, especially whether you're doing a pole mount or a ground mount or a roof mount, that stuff can get pricey. And if you're doing a ground mount, you got to get down 4 or 5 feet, put a bunch of concrete on the poles. So if you got pretty high winds, your panels are not going to go flying away. So.
Well, thank you, everyone. And we'll probably have some kind of follow-up to this, at least a video. But we will be doing some follow-up later on. And thank you for coming. God bless. And y'all have a wonderful evening.
Y'all take care and God bless. Now let's see. I need to. Let's see.
Bottom right.
Oh, this is just. It's too high tech for me, folks. I'm telling you. What happened is my mouse quit working. Yeah.
Uh-oh. So we're still here, guys.
Yeah, I'll be out in a minute.
The high-tech guy.
Yeah, I got to get new batteries for my mouse. So there it is. It's batteries again.
Yeah.
And end stream.
There we go. Goodbye.
See y'all later. Hey, come on. Yeah, there we go. All right.